The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under a punishing midday sun. Heat waves shimmered off the white sand like liquid glass, distorting the horizon where mountains met sky. At the Arizona Defense Testing Range, temperatures had already climbed past 94 degrees Fahrenheit, and it wasn't even noon. 13 of the most elite snipers in the United States military stood in a loose formation behind the firing line. Navy SEALs, Delta operators, Marine scout snipers, recon shooters with confirmed kills spanning 3 continents and 2 decades of classified operations. Their combined experience totaled over 400 years of military service. Their collective kill count exceeded 3,000 confirmed eliminations, and every single one of them had just failed. General Marcus Reed stood at the observation platform, his jaw tight, watching as the 13th shooter rose from behind his rifle. Master Chief Vincent Doyle, 22 years in the teams, 3 silver stars, a legend in NSW community, pulled back from the scope of his Seiko TRG intervention and shook his head slowly. No impact, the spotter confirmed into radio. Round went approximately 6 meters right of center mass. Reed's fingers curled around the binoculars hanging from his neck. 6 meters. On a target that sat exactly 4,000 meters away. 2.5 miles of superheated air, invisible crosswinds, and physics that defied human calculation. That's 13, Colonel Patterson said quietly from Reed's left. 13 of the best trigger pullers on the planet. Reed said nothing. He'd known the shot was theoretical at best. At 4,000 meters, a bullet dropped over 800 feet before reaching its target. Flight time stretched to nearly 4 seconds, an eternity during which wind, temperature, humidity, Coriolis effect, and spin drift conspire to push the round in unpredictable directions. Most military engagements happened under 600 meters. This shot was 7 times that distance. This shot was supposed to be impossible. That was exactly why the Ghost program needed someone who could make it. The snipers began packing their gear. Low conversations drifted across the firing line. Excuses, calculations, complained about the wind that gusted from the northeast at 12 miles per hour with irregular spikes to 15. Someone mentioned the barometric pressure. Someone else blamed the ammunition. General, Colonel Patterson lowered his voice. What do we tell Washington? They want a name by Friday. Reed's eyes swept across the assembled shooters. Millions of dollars in training. Decades of operational experience. Every major unit in SOCOM represented. And not one of them could thread a bullet through the impossible window this mission required. We tell them the truth, Reed said. The shot can't be made. Permission to try, sir. The voice came from behind them. Quiet. Female. Absolutely unremarkable. Reed turned. A woman stood at the edge of the observation platform. She wore standard-issue desert fatigues with no unit patches, no combat badges, no deployment markers. Her rank insignia showed captain, logistics division based on her branch tape. Her brown hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her face showed the weathered lines of someone who'd spent years under harsh sun, though nothing about her bearing suggested operator experience. Patterson's eyebrows rose. Excuse me. Permission to attempt a challenge shot, sir. Her voice remained steady, almost clinical. I understand parameters. A ripple of laughter spread through the nearby snipers. Master Chief Doyle turned, his expression somewhere between amusement and disbelief. Did the supply clerk just ask to outshoot 13 Tier 1 operators? More laughter. Someone muttered, Aunt Sarah's got jokes, under their breath. Reed studied the woman. Her name tape read Langford. Her eyes, pale gray, almost colorless in the desert light, didn't waver. They didn't show embarrassment or uncertainty. They showed absolutely nothing at all. Captain, Patterson said with forced patience, this is a restricted qualification trial. These men have spent years. I'm aware of their qualifications, Colonel. Langford's gaze remained on Reed. I'm also aware that 0 of 13 successfully engaged the target. At the current failure rate, qualification will not be achieved regardless of how many additional attempts are authorized. The laughter died. Several snipers shifted uncomfortably. Your logistics, Doyle said, stepping closer. His 6'3" frame towered over Langford's 5'7". You count bullets. You don't fire them. I've fired a few. Lady, I've got pubic hairs older than your service record. This isn't Call of Duty. This is a 4,000-meter shot in conditions that 12 miles per hour northeast, gusting to 15 on a 47-second cycle. Langford's voice cut through his dismissal like a scalpel. 18% humidity. Temperature 94 Fahrenheit with ground convection adding approximately 6 degrees at the firing position. Barometric pressure 30.09 inches of mercury. Coriolis correction at this latitude requires approximately 6 inches left compensation. Spin drift adds 0.3 inches. The wind drops to 9 miles per hour for roughly 3 seconds at the bottom of each gust cycle, which is your engagement window. If that opening hooked you, buckle up. This story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Now, let me show you what happened next. Silence fell across the firing line. Doyle's smirk had frozen on his face. Behind him, the other snipers exchanged glances. Langford hadn't looked at a kestrometer, hadn't consulted any instruments. She'd read the invisible patterns of the desert air the way most people read highway signs. Reed's eyes narrowed. Something shifted in his expression, recognition trying to surface through decades of briefings and classified files. "You've done this before," he said slowly. Langford didn't answer. "General," Patterson said urgently, "we can't let an unqualified logistics officer. Let her shoot." Patterson stared. "Sir, clear the line." Reed's voice carried the weight of a man who commanded 3 combat divisions. "Give her the platform." The snipers hesitated. Doyle's face reddened with barely contained outrage. But Reed's rank held absolute authority here, and after a tense moment, the shooter stepped back. Langford walked to the firing position without hurrying. Her boots crunched against the sand with measured precision, each step deliberate, each movement economical. She didn't acknowledge the stares burning into her back. She didn't react to the muttered comments questioning her sanity, her credentials, her right to breathe the same air as the men she just interrupted. She stopped at the rifle station and looked down at the Seiko TRG intervention, chambered in .408 caliber. The weapon was beautiful, cutting-edge, precision-engineered, worth more than most civilian vehicles. A custom match-grade barrel, adjustable cheek rest, bipod calibrated for micro-adjustments. Langford studied it for exactly 4 seconds. Then she walked past it. "Where the hell is she going?" Doyle's voice carried across the sand. Langford moved toward the logistics tent pitched 50 meters behind the firing line. The canvas flaps rippled in the hot wind as she ducked inside. Silence stretched across the range, the kind of confused, uncomfortable quiet that descends when nobody understands what they're witnessing. Inside the tent, Langford navigated between stacked crates of MREs, ammunition containers, and communications equipment. Her hands moved without hesitation, reaching beneath her standard-issue cot and extracting a long black case that had been hidden under olive drab blankets. The case was old, scratched. One corner showed impact damage from what might have been shrapnel or an IED blast. But the latches still clicked with precision when she thumbed them open. Inside, nested in custom foam, lay an M24 sniper weapon system. The rifle was officially decommissioned. Its serial number had been struck from Army inventory records 6 years ago, listed as destroyed in a Kandahar province firefight that had killed 4 operators and wounded 3 others. The paperwork said the weapon had been unsalvageable. The paperwork lied. Langford lifted the M24 with reverence. The wood stock bore deep scratches and a patch of darkened grain that might have been old blood. The bolt action moved with silk-smooth precision, clearly maintained with obsessive care despite its official non-existence. She reached into the case and retrieved a small leather pouch. Inside were 6 rounds, hand-loaded, custom-weighted bullets she'd spent 6 months constructing. The brass casings gleamed dully in the filtered tent light. On each one, tiny letters had been engraved into the metal. For those who fell. Langford selected a single round, her thumb tracing engraving once, a ritual, perhaps, or an apology. Then she closed the case, tucked the leather pouch into her cargo pocket, and walked back toward the firing line. The snipers watched her emerge from the logistics tent, carrying a rifle that looked older than some of their careers. "Is that an M24? Someone asked incredulously. "She's going to try a 4,000-meter shot with a bolt gun from the 90s? This should be good. Someone filmed this." We need evidence for the debrief. Langford ignored them all. She reached the firing position and settled into prone with practice economy. No wasted motion, no adjustment period. Her body aligned with the rifle as if they'd been designed as a single system. General Reed stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the M24 scarred stock, on the way Langford's hands moved with automatic precision, on the complete absence of nervousness in her posture. "That rifle isn't in any inventory I know," he said quietly. "No, sir." Langford's voice remained flat. "It isn't. Care to explain how a logistics captain acquired a decommissioned sniper system?" "Not particularly, sir." Reed should have ordered her off the platform, should have demanded answers, confiscated the weapon, launched an investigation. Instead, something in the depths of his memory stirred. A briefing from years ago, a classified after-action report he'd read, in a SCF at the Pentagon, a name redacted so thoroughly that even he hadn't been clear to see it. "Make your shot, Captain." Langford didn't acknowledge the authorization. She was already settling into her shooting position, shoulders dropping, breathing slowing. The snipers behind her fell silent, not from respect, but from morbid curiosity. They wanted to watch her fail, wanted to see the arrogant supply clerk humiliated by the same physics that had defeated 13 of the world's best. The Seiko TRG sat untouched beside her. Langford had chosen her M24, the decommissioned relic, the ghost weapon that officially didn't exist, over cutting-edge technology worth $100,000. "She's not even using the good rifle," Doyle muttered. "Maybe she thinks the wind will carry her bullet personally. For 1,000 meters with a 20-year-old bolt gun. Someone wake me when she comes back to reality." Langford's right hand settled over the rifle's grip. Her left supported the forestock with the barest contact. Fingers curved, pressure minimal, allowing the weapon to move naturally with each breath cycle. She didn't reach for the Kestrel weather meter, didn't check the data printouts that every other sniper had studied obsessively. Instead, her eyes, those pale gray windows into something none of them could name, swept across the desert landscape. She watched the dust devil form 200 meters to her left, calculated its rotation speed, noted the direction of its collapse. She observed the way heat waves rippled at varying heights across the shooting lane, mapping temperature gradients invisible to instrumentation. She tracked a hawk circling 500 meters downrange, watched its wing adjustments as it compensated for wind shifts, and absorbed the data without conscious thought. 15 years of doing this. 15 years of reading the world through a scope, of understanding physics at a level that transcended mathematics and became instinct. The other snipers used Kestrels because they'd been trained to use Kestrels. Sarah Langford had been trained differently. She'd been trained to become the instrument. Her breathing settled into a rhythm. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out. Her heart rate, already low, began its deliberate descent. 59 beats per minute. 57. 55. "She's not adjusting her scope," Patterson said with growing unease. Every other shooter spent 5 minutes dialing in compensation. Reed's jaw tightened. "I notice." Langford reached into her cargo pocket. Her fingers found the leather pouch, extracted the single hand-loaded round. The brass caught the sun, briefly illuminating the engraved words, "For those who fell." For names ghosted through her mind. Walsh, Kellerman, Bishop, Brennan. She pushed the round into the M24's chamber. The bolt cycled forward with sound like a whispered prayer. "Engaging," she said. No fanfare, no hesitation, no dramatic pause. Her finger touched the trigger with 2 pounds of pressure, exactly half the brake weight. Her left hand made a microscopic adjustment to the rifle's cant, compensating for a wind shift that hadn't appeared on any instrument yet, because it hadn't happened yet. The desert air above the firing lane shimmered. The wind cycle was approaching its 47-second reset. In approximately 6 seconds, the 12-mile-per-hour gust would dip to 9 for a 3-second window. That window was her engagement opportunity, the only moment when the crosswind correction wouldn't exceed the rifle's effective compensation range. Langford's eye pressed against the scope. The target sat 4,000 meters away, a steel silhouette the size of a human torso, barely visible through the heat distortion. At this distance, even powerful optics struggled to provide clarity. She didn't need clarity. She'd visualized this shot 1,000 times. 10,000. The target wasn't a piece of steel at 2.5 miles. It was the space between heartbeats, the silence between breaths, the stillness that existed when everything else, the mocking voices, the burning sun, the weight of 6 years spent hiding, finally fell away. 3 seconds the window. Her mind performed calculations that would have required a ballistics computer for any other shooter. Bullet drop at 4,000 meters, 812 feet. Muzzle velocity of her hand-loaded round, 3,500 feet per second. Flight time, 3.76 seconds. Spin rate, 280,000 rotations per minute. She dialed nothing on her scope. The corrections lived in her fingers, in the micro-adjustments of her hold, in the relationship between her body and the rifle that had survived Kandahar when nothing else had. 2 seconds. The wind began its descent. 12 miles per hour. 11. 10. Behind her, General Reed watched with an expression that had shifted from curiosity to something approaching recognition. The way she moved, the stillness in her posture, the complete absence of self-consciousness that came only from thousands of hours of operational experience. He'd seen that stillness before. Once, in a classified briefing about a unit that officially didn't exist. 1 second. Wind speed, 9 miles per hour. Holding. Langford's finger added the final pound of pressure. The M24 spoke. The report rolled across the desert, a flat, authoritative crack that silenced every other sound. Langford's shoulder absorbed the recoil without movement. The rifle settled back to position as if nothing had happened. 3.76 seconds. The bullet left the barrel at 3,500 feet per second. It rose initially. The only way to compensate for 800 feet of drop was to aim at empty sky. For the first half second, the round climbed, fighting gravity, spinning at 280,000 RPM to maintain stability. Then it began its descent. Physics took over. Wind pushed from the right. The Coriolis effect tugged left. Spin drift added rightward deviation. Heat thermals created invisible columns of rising air that deflected the bullet's path in ways that couldn't be calculated, only anticipated. Langford had anticipated all of it. 2 seconds of flight time. The bullet crossed the 2,000-meter mark, traveling faster than the speed of sound. Its copper jacket began heating from air friction. The math that governed its path would have filled chalkboards. But for Sarah Langford, the math had long ago become something simpler. The math had become faith. Faith in 15 years of training. Faith in the weapon she'd carried through 6 deployments. Faith in a hand-loaded round she spent 6 months constructing, weighing each grain of powder, measuring each millimeter of projectile, engraving names on brass because the dead deserved to fly one more time. 3 seconds. At 3,000 meters, the bullet had dropped 400 feet. Its velocity had declined to 2,000 feet per second. Wind continued pushing, but the corrections she'd built into the initial aim were holding. The snipers behind her began to shift. A 4,000-meter shot took almost 4 seconds to reach its target. In that eternity, professional shooters could visualize everything that might go wrong, and most of them were already composing the explanations they'd offer when the supply clerk's bullet missed by meters instead of inches. 3.5 seconds. 3.6. 3.7. The bullet reached the target. Clang. The sound took its own journey. 10 seconds to travel back across 4,000 meters of desert air. But everyone heard it. A single unmistakable impact. Steel striking steel. Impact. The forward observer's voice crackled over the radio. His tone had changed. The professional neutrality replaced by something that sounded like shock. Impact center mass. Repeat. Direct hit center mass. Distance confirmed 4,000 meters. Silence. Absolute crushing silence. Langford didn't move. Her eye remained pressed to the scope, watching the target she just struck from a distance that 13 elite snipers had declared impossible. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her heart rate held at 55 beats per minute. No celebration. No triumph. Just completion. What the hell? Master Chief Doyle breathed. General Reed stepped forward. His boots crunched against the sand, the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone mute. Captain Langford. She rose from prone position with fluid economy. The M24 came with her, cradled in her arms like something precious, which, of course, it was. Sir, that rifle was listed as destroyed in Afghanistan. August 2016, Kandahar Province. Langford's expression didn't change. Things get mislabeled in combat, sir. The operator who carried it was also listed as Kia. A woman. No name in the files I saw, just a call sign. Behind them, the snipers had begun clustering closer. The mockery was gone from their faces. In its place, confusion, disbelief, and the first stirrings of recognition as pieces started clicking into place. Tell me something, Captain. Reed's voice dropped to a register that only she could hear. That call sign. It was a bird, wasn't it? Langford's jaw tightened. The first crack in her armor, nearly invisible, but Reed had been reading people for 40 years. Sparrow, he said. Sparrow 6. The name landed like a detonation. Several of the senior operators knew that call sign, not from personal experience, but from whispered stories that circulated through the special operations community. Stories about a ghost unit shooter who operated so far outside normal parameters that most of her missions remained classified above top secret. 52 operations, 47 confirmed kills over 1,500 meters. A legend whose identity had been scrubbed from every accessible database because the things she'd done required permanent anonymity. Sparrow 6. She's dead, Doyle said flatly, killed in a Kandahar ambush. I was at the memorial service. Were you? Reed's eyes never left Langford. Funny thing about memorial services for operators whose names never existed tend to make the casualty reports flexible. Langford's grip on the M24 tightened, just a fraction, just enough for Reed to notice. 6 years of hiding. 6 years of carefully constructed anonymity, of logistics spreadsheets and supply requisitions, and the comfortable invisibility of a job no one respected. One shot, and it was all unraveling. I'm a logistics captain, she said. I count bullets. You count them because you know exactly how many it takes. Reed's voice carried a weight that silenced the murmuring operators. August 17th, 2016. Afobe, Kabul. A 4-man recon team got ambushed in the mountains. Bad intelligence. Enemy force 5 times the expected size. They were pinned down for 43 minutes. The desert wind had died. The sun beat down with relentless pressure. I was part of the QRF that day, Reed continued. By the time we reached the site, 12 hostiles were dead. All precision shots. All kills at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. The longest was 2,847 meters. Langford's breathing had changed. Deeper, more controlled, the way operators breathe when they were suppressing emotional responses that could compromise their function. The shooter who made those kills was wounded evacuating her teammates, Reed said. She refused medical attention until every body was accounted for. Then she disappeared from official records. Her rifle was listed as destroyed. Her identity was erased. The only thing that survived was a call sign and an after-action report I wasn't supposed to read. General, Langford's voice had gone flat. The emotionless tone of someone reciting information that had lost the power to hurt her. That shooter lost 4 teammates. 12 kills out of 19 rounds in 43 minutes. The math was wrong. For targets remained operational when the QRF arrived. Those 4 targets were eliminated by the rescue force. Those 4 targets shouldn't have been there. The words hung in the air, sharp, bitter, aimed inward like weapons. She needed 20 kills, Langford continued. She made 12. The math doesn't care about feelings. She failed. Reed studied her for a long moment. The snipers behind them had gone silent, the kind of silence that descended when people realized they were witnessing something that would never be discussed publicly. Captain Langford, Reed's voice softened. The shooter I read about saved 3 lives that day. The only reason anyone survived was because she held off 20 hostiles for 43 minutes from 1,600 meters while bleeding from shrapnel wounds. And lost 4. 4 deaths in an impossible situation don't equal failure. Tell that to Walsh. Langford's voice cracked, the first real emotion she'd shown. Tell that to Kellerman and Bishop and Brennan. They're still dead, General. 12 kills for deaths, and a rifle that should have been faster. The wind returned, a hot gust that kicked sand against their boots. Somewhere in the distance, the hawk that Langford had tracked earlier called out, its cries swallowed by the vast emptiness of the desert. Reed reached into his pocket. His fingers found a photograph, creased from years of handling, edges worn soft. He held it up. The image showed 5 figures in desert camouflage, faces obscured by tactical gear. 4 men and 1 woman posed in front of a mud brick compound with mountains rising behind them. The woman was smaller than the others, positioned slightly apart, a rifle that looked remarkably like the M24 in Langford's arms cradled against her chest. FOB Kabul, Reed said. 2 weeks before the ambush. This photo was in Sergeant Brennan's personal effects. Langford's jaw locked. Her eyes, those pale gray mirrors that had shown nothing but control, finally revealed what she'd buried for 6 years. Payne, why are you doing this, sir? Because I need to understand something. Reed tucked the photograph away. That shot you just made. For 1,000 meters with a rifle that doesn't exist, using ammunition that no one authorized, reading wind patterns that no instrument detected. That wasn't a shot of someone who failed. Langford said nothing. That was a shot of someone who's been practicing. Reed's voice carried something almost like accusation. Every day, for 6 years. Practicing a shot that no military application could ever require, unless you weren't practicing for a mission. The wind gusted again. Sand hissed across the firing platform. You were practicing to prove you could still do it. Reed's words landed like precision strikes. Proving to yourself that the rifle still worked, that your hands still worked, that the 12 kills weren't flukes and the 4 deaths weren't your fault. Langford's breathing had stopped. Just for a moment, just long enough for Reed to see that he'd landed somewhere true. How many shots have you taken in the last 6 years, Captain? I don't estimate. Her silence stretched. The snipers behind her watched with expressions that had shifted from contempt to something approaching understanding. They'd all known shooters who couldn't put down the rifle, men who left the teams or the units or the battalions and still found themselves at ranges, in backyards, in the woods, firing at targets that only they could see. 847,000, Langford said quietly, give or take. The number landed like a body. 847,000 rounds over 6 years. That was nearly 400 shots per day, every day, without exception. The cost and ammunition alone would have exceeded most people's annual salary. My God, someone muttered behind them. That's not practice, Doyle said. His voice had lost its mockery. That's penance. Langford's eyes finally met Reed's. And in that moment, the general saw everything she'd been hiding. The guilt that buried her alive, the punishment she'd chosen because medals and promotions felt like insults, the deliberate invisibility of logistics posting where no one would ever look at her record and see the ghost she'd become. For teammates, she said, 12 kills, 847,000 attempts to figure out how to make those numbers balance. And the math still doesn't work. Langford's voice dropped to barely a whisper. It never will. Reed let the silence hold. The desert stretched around them, ancient, indifferent, a landscape that had watched countless warriors struggle against impossible odds and had never judged any of them. I was there, he finally said. FOB Kabul. I was a lieutenant colonel commanding the QRF. When we reached your position, you were still firing. Shrapnel in your left thigh, dehydrated, down to your last 3 rounds. And you were still firing. Langford's hand tightened on the M24. Do you know what happened after we evacuated you? Reed stepped closer. The intelligence we recovered from that site led to the neutralization of a Taliban command network. 17 additional hostiles eliminated in follow-up operations. A bomb-making cell dismantled. An IED campaign that would have killed dozens of coalition soldiers stopped before it started. I didn't. You held that position for 43 minutes. Alone, against 20-1 odds. The intel analysts calculated that each minute you bought them extended the operational window by a factor 3. Your 12 kills created cascading effects that we're still measuring. Langford's jaw worked. Words seemed to struggle in her throat. Objections, maybe, or counterarguments that had sustained her through years of self-imposed exile. That's why I brought you here, Reed said. She blinked. Sir, this trial, the 4,000-meter qualification. Reed gestured at the firing line, at the watching snipers, at the target still ringing faintly in the distance. It was designed to identify candidates for a new program, but I suspected, hoped, that word would reach certain communities. Communities where someone with very specific skills might hear about an impossible shot and feel compelled to prove she could still make it. Understanding dawned in Langford's eyes. The anger followed immediately after. You used this as bait. I used this as an invitation. Reed's voice remained steady. Sparrow 6 has been dead for 6 years. But the woman who made those kills, who saved my team, who demonstrated capabilities that every analyst said were impossible, that woman deserved a chance to stop punishing herself. I'm not. You're hiding, Reed cut her off. You're counting bullets for other operators because you can't stand the thought of firing them yourself. You're buried in logistic spreadsheets because every time you pick up a rifle, you see 4 faces staring back at you. Langford's expression hardened, but she didn't deny it. The Ghost program needs an instructor, Reed said. Someone who can teach operators to make shots that most people believe are impossible. Someone who understands that the math isn't everything, that sometimes a shooter has to become something more than calculation. You want me to train snipers. I want you to create ghosts. Reed's voice carried absolute certainty. The next generation, operators who can do what you did at Kabul, hold impossible positions, engage impossible targets, survive impossible odds. Langford looked down at the M24 arms, the scarred stock, the worn grip, the rifle that had made 12 kills when 20 were needed. I wasn't fast enough, she said. No one could have been. Reed stepped closer until his shadow fell across her. 20-1 with bad intelligence and no support. The fact that you made 12 kills instead of 0 is the only reason anyone walked out of that valley. Brennan didn't walk out. Sergeant Brennan died because a Taliban fighter got lucky with an RPK burst, not because you missed a shot. Reed's voice softened. His family received a letter from me explaining exactly what happened. His sister enlisted 6 months later. She's in the pipeline now. Special Operations Selection. Langford's head came up. Elena, you know her? I knew her brother. The words came slowly. He talked about her constantly. Little sister who wanted to follow him into the teams. He made me promise. She stopped. Whatever promise Brennan had extracted from her remained locked behind the wall she'd built. Elena Brennan is one of 5 candidates who qualify for the Ghost Training Program, Reed said. The program that currently has no instructor, because the only person in the world capable of teaching this level of precision marksmanship has spent 6 years counting MREs in a supply tent. The wind shifted. The temperature had climbed past 95 degrees, and the sand beneath their feet radiated heat like a furnace. Langford stood motionless, caught between the gravity of what Reed was offering and the weight of what she'd buried. 12 kills, 4 deaths, 847,000 practice rounds fired into paper targets that couldn't bleed. I can't, she said. You can. Reed's voice held no sympathy, only certainty. The question is whether you will. You don't understand. Langford's control was slipping. The mask she'd worn for 6 years showed cracks that couldn't be hidden anymore. Every time I look through a scope, I see them. Walsh taking the first round. Kellerman trying to stop the bleeding. Bishop covered my retreat while I reloaded. Brennan, her voice broke. Brennan was still alive when I started engaging. He could hear my rifle. He knew I was up there. And I watched him die because I couldn't cycle fast enough. 3.76 seconds. Langford froze. What? Your shot just now. From trigger pull to impact. 3.76 seconds. Reed's eyes held hers. Do you know what the theoretical minimum flight time is for a 4,000-meter shot? 4.1 seconds. You beat physics by nearly half a second. You didn't calculate that shot. You felt it. It doesn't matter. It matters because you're still searching for speed. Reed's voice rose slightly, the command tone that had directed battalions into combat. You spent 6 years trying to shoot faster, reload faster, acquire faster. And you made a shot today that will probably stand as a record for the next decade. But it won't bring them back, Captain. Nothing will. Langford's jaw locked. So stop trying to save them retroactively. Reed lowered his voice. Save someone else. Save Elena Brennan and 4 other candidates who need to learn what you know. Give them the skills that might keep them alive when the math stops working, and instinct is all that's left. The desert stretch around them, endless, ancient, unforgiving. Langford looked out across the white sand toward the target she'd struck from 4,000 meters away. If I do this, she said slowly, it doesn't mean I've forgiven myself. It doesn't have to mean anything except forward motion. Reed reached into his pocket and extracted something that glinted in the harsh sun, a small metal insignia. The Ghost program is classified above top secret. You'll have full authority over training protocols. The facility is at Phantom Site, mountain terrain, 7,000 feet elevation. You'll have access to every resource SOCOM can provide. Langford looked at the insignia. A silver bird, wings spread, head turned as if scanning for prey. Sparrow, she said. The program needs a symbol. I thought the call sign of the woman who originated its capabilities was appropriate. Langford took the insignia. Her fingers closed around the metal, feeling its weight. When do I start? Tomorrow. A transport will take you to Phantom Site at 0600. Reed's expression finally softened, just slightly. Welcome back, Captain Langford. Sparrow 6. The correction came automatically. And for the first time in 6 years, the name didn't feel like an accusation. Master Chief Doyle stepped forward. His expression had transformed completely, the mockery replaced by something that looked almost like respect. I've got a nephew in the pipeline, he said. Third attempt at special operations selection. Kid's got talent, but can't get his wind reads right. Langford looked at him. Send me his file. Ma'am. Doyle actually straightened. Thank you. The other snipers began to disperse, returning to their stations, packing their gear, processing what they'd witnessed. The supply clerk who'd outshot 13 Tier 1 operators. The ghost who'd risen from a logistics tent to make an impossible shot with a rifle that didn't exist. Stories would spread, exaggerated, probably embellished, but the core truth would survive. Somewhere in the Arizona desert, a woman had proven that the impossible was merely a word, and that the dead could still fly if you loaded them into the right brass casing. Reed watched Langford walk back toward her tent. The M24 was still cradled in her arms, the only possession that truly mattered. Colonel, he said quietly. Patterson stepped forward. Sir, make sure she gets everything she asks for. Budget is not a concern. If she needs custom ammunition, custom equipment, custom facilities, authorize it. Understood, sir. What exactly is the objective of this program? Reed looked toward the distant target, still standing after absorbing a round that had traveled 2.5 miles through hostile air. We're building ghosts, he said. Operators who can disappear into any environment and strike from distances that shouldn't be possible. And we're giving them to a woman who spent 6 years trying to outrun the dead. Do you think she can do it? Reed watched Langford duck into her tent. The canvas flaps settled behind her, obscuring her from view. She just made a 4,000-meter shot with a decommissioned rifle and hand-loaded ammunition that she built herself. She read wind patterns without instruments. She slowed her heart rate to 55 beats per minute through sheer will. Reed's voice carried conviction. She could do anything. The question was whether she believed it. Phantom Site. The facility clung to a mountain ridge at 7,000 feet elevation, a cluster of concrete buildings and training ranges carved into the rock. Wind screamed through the passes at night. Temperatures dropped below freezing even in summer. The nearest paved road was 43 miles away, and the only access was by helicopter or a four-wheel drive track that looked like it had been designed to discourage visitors. It was perfect. Langford arrived on a Black Hawk 2 days after the Arizona incident. Her M24 was secured in a hard case at her feet. Her leather ballistics notebook, 15 years of observations, calculations, wind patterns, and kills, was tucked into her cargo pocket. She carried nothing else. The 5 candidates were waiting on the helipad, 4 men and 1 woman, standing at attention in the mountain wind. Their faces showed the hard edges of special operations selection, the sleeplessness, the physical punishment, the psychological pressure that weeded out 90% of applicants. Langford stepped off the helicopter. Her eyes swept across the line, assessing posture, physical condition, psychological state. 15 years of reading targets had made her exceptional at reading people. At ease, she said. The candidates relaxed slightly. My name is Captain Sarah Langford. My call sign is Sparrow 6. I will be your instructor for the next 9 months. One of the candidates, a bulky Marine Raider with the build of a linebacker, spoke up. Ma'am, we heard you made a 4,000-meter shot. Is that accurate? Langford looked at him. What's your name? Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole, ma'am. Do you think distance matters, Staff Sergeant? Cole hesitated. Distance is everything in precision shooting, ma'am. It determines. Distance is nothing. Langford's voice cut through his explanation. Distance is just time. Time is just patience. Patience is just another word for control over every variable that exists between your trigger finger and the target center mass. She walked down the line, studying each candidate. The shot I made in Arizona was 4,000 meters. The shot I made in Kandahar, the one that mattered, was 2,847 meters. But the shot I think about every single day was 1,592 meters. Langford stopped in front of a female candidate at the end of the line. The woman was smaller than the others, 5'6", lean and compact, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes showed the same haunted quality that Langford saw every time she looked in a mirror. Specialist Elena Brennan. Langford said, "Ma'am, you look like your brother." Elena's jaw tightened. "I've heard that, ma'am. He talked about you constantly. Little sister who could outshoot him at family reunions, who wanted to follow him into the teams even though he told her it was the worst life choice she could make. He was wrong, ma'am." Langford studied her for a long moment. The wind howled past them, cold and cutting at this elevation. Behind them, the Black Hawk was already lifting off, rotors churning the thin air. "He made me promise to look out for you." The words came out before Langford could stop them. Before the last mission, he said, "Sparrow, if something happens to me, keep my sister out of this life. She deserves better." Elena's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. "With respect, ma'am, my brother didn't get to decide what I deserve. That's my choice." "Is it?" Langford's voice softened, the first warmth she'd shown since arriving. "Or is it about proving something to a ghost?" "Both." Elena didn't flinch. "I want to be here because I want to be here. And I want to honor him because he was the best man I've ever known. Those two things don't cancel each other out." Langford nodded slowly. "No, they don't." She turned to address all 5 candidates. "The Ghost program will transform you. It will strip away everything you thought you knew about precision shooting and rebuild you from the ground up. You will learn to read wind without instruments. You will learn to engage targets at distances that every training manual says are impossible. You will learn to disappear into any environment and strike without warning." The wind gusted. Somewhere in the mountains, a raptor cried out. "But first, you will learn to fail." The candidates exchanged uncertain glances. "Failure is not the enemy," Langford continued. "I know this because I failed in the worst possible way. I lost 4 teammates because I couldn't make the math work fast enough. And for 6 years, I punished myself for that failure instead of learning from it." She looked at each of them in turn. "The Ghost program exists because failure is inevitable. No shooter is perfect. No mission goes exactly according to plan. What matters is what you do after the failure, whether you let it bury you or whether you use it to become something better." Staff Sergeant Cole spoke again. "Ma'am, what if we fail here? During training?" Langford's expression didn't change. "Then you fail here instead of failing in the field where your teammates pay the price. That's the point. Every failure in training is a death that doesn't happen on deployment." She turned and began walking toward the training complex. The candidates fell in behind her, their boots crunching on the gravel path. "Training begins tomorrow at 0400. 8 hours of classroom instruction on wind mechanics. Then we shoot. 9 months." The Ghost program transformed them, exactly as Langford had promised. Every candidate who'd arrived thinking they understood precision shooting was broken down and rebuilt into something new. Staff Sergeant Cole learned to read wind by watching birds, by observing dust patterns, by feeling temperature changes on the exposed skin of his face. He made his first 2,000-meter shot on day 47, his first 3,000-meter shot on day 112. Sergeant First Class Jackson developed an intuitive understanding of atmospheric pressure that bordered on supernatural. He could predict weather changes 12 hours before they appeared on instruments. His longest confirmed training kill was 3,400 meters. The other candidates progressed at their own rates. Some excelled at long-range engagements. Others demonstrated exceptional skill in rapid target acquisition. Each found their specialty, the niche where their particular combination of talent and discipline could achieve what others couldn't. But Elena Brennan was different. She didn't just learn. She absorbed. Every technique Langford demonstrated became part of her repertoire within days. Every correction Langford offered was implemented immediately and never required repetition. The way she moved, breathed, aligned with her weapon, it was as if she'd been practicing in some hidden dimension long before she arrived at Phantom Sight. She's better than I was at her age, Langford told General Reed during a quarterly progress call. Possibly better than I am now. That's not possible, Reed said to secure connection. You just made a record-breaking shot that. I know what I said, sir. Langford's voice was quiet. She has something I never did. Some kind of natural alignment between mind and body that I've only seen in maybe 3 shooters in my entire career. With proper development, she could exceed any capability we've documented. What's her call sign? Langford paused. I haven't assigned one yet. I wanted to wait until she was ready. And when will that be? Soon. On day 247, Langford called Elena to the primary range. The weather was brutal. Wind gusting at 18 miles per hour, temperature hovering near freezing, visibility limited by light snow. Today's target is at 3,800 meters, Langford said, approximately 2 1/3 miles. You'll be using the Seiko TRG chambered in .408. Elena's eyes widened slightly. No candidate had attempted a shot beyond 3,500 meters during training. 3,800 was pushing the edge of theoretical capability. You've been holding back, Langford continued. I can see it in your mechanics. You're shooting within your comfort zone because you're afraid of what happens when you push beyond it. Ma'am, I'm not. You are. Langford's voice was firm but not unkind. Your brother died because the world doesn't give you comfortable shots. The hostiles who ambush you don't position themselves at convenient distances. The people you're trying to save don't wait at ranges where your confidence is high. Elena's jaw tightened. The wind screamed past them, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. You can make this shot, Langford said. You've been ready for weeks. But you keep finding reasons to stay safe, to shoot distances that don't require you to trust yourself completely. What if I miss? Then you miss. Langford stepped closer. And then you figure out why and try again. That's all any of us can do. Elena looked at the rifle. The Seiko TRG gleamed dully in the gray mountain light. Precision-engineered, chambered for long-range engagement, capable of feats that would seem impossible to anyone who didn't understand the physics involved. My brother talked about you, she said quietly. In his letters, he never used your name, just Sparrow. He said you were the best shooter he'd ever seen. Langford said nothing. He said you could make shots that violated the laws of physics. That watching you work was like watching magic. Except it wasn't magic. It was just preparation that went deeper than anyone else's. Your brother was generous. My brother was honest. Elena's eyes met Langford's. He believed in you completely. Even when things went bad. The wind gusted. Snow swirled around them. He wrote me a letter the night before that last mission. Elena continued. He said, if anything happens, don't blame Sparrow. Whatever goes wrong, she'll do more than anyone else could. She'll find a way to save us, or she'll die trying. Langford's breath caught. 6 years of guilt suddenly felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. He was right about the trying, she said. Wrong about the saving. No. Elena's voice carried certainty. 3 operators made it out. Because of you. 3 families got to bury their loved ones. 3 sets of parents got closure instead of MIA uncertainty. My brother didn't survive, but he knew you did everything possible. That mattered to him. How do you know? Because I know Michael. Elena's eyes glistened, but her voice remained steady. He didn't write that letter thinking he'd die. He wrote it because he knew you'd carry the weight if things went wrong. He wanted to leave something that might help you put it down eventually. Langford stood in the snow, letting the words settle. Make the shot, she finally said. 3,800 meters. Show me what you can do. Elena took position behind the Seiko TRG. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate descended. The techniques Langford had taught her activated one by one. The muscle memory, the atmospheric calculation, the transformation of conscious thought into instinct. She watched the wind, felt the temperature dropping, calculated the shot without instruments, exactly as she'd been trained. Engaging, she said. The rifle spoke. The round traveled for nearly 4 seconds. Langford watched through her binoculars, tracking the trail of disturbance the bullet left in the falling snow. At 3,800 meters, a shot required not just precision but faith. Faith that the calculations were correct, faith that the weapon would perform, faith that physics would cooperate for just long enough. The steel target rang. Impact. The range controller confirmed. Direct hit, upper center mass. Distance verified at 3,812 meters. Elena exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled. Just slightly. Just enough to show that the shot had pushed her further than anything she'd attempted before. Langford stepped forward. Her hand settled on Elena's shoulder. The first physical contact she'd made with any candidate in 9 months. Sparrow 7, she said. Elena looked up. Ma'am, your call sign. Langford's voice carried something that might have been pride. You've earned it. The wind howled around them. The snow fell harder. But neither of them moved. I can't replace Michael, Langford said quietly. But I can give you the skills that might keep you alive when everything goes wrong. That's the only repayment I can offer. It's enough. Elena rose from her shooting position. It's more than enough. Over the following months, the Ghost program expanded. 24 operators graduated from the training pipeline, each carrying skills that exceeded conventional special operations capabilities. They deployed to classified locations around the world. Some went to Afghanistan, continuing the fight against Taliban networks that had survived 2 decades of coalition operations. Others deployed to Syria, Iraq, East Africa, Southeast Asia. Reports filtered back through classified channels. Hostages rescued from distances that shouldn't have been possible. Ambushes thwarted by precision fire from concealed positions. High-value targets eliminated from ranges that exceeded every documented engagement. And through it all, Sparrow 6 watched. Langford stood on the observation platform at Phantom Site, watching Elena lead a training exercise for the second cohort of candidates. The woman who'd arrived haunted by her brother's memory had transformed into something remarkable, a leader who combined technical excellence with emotional intelligence that surpassed most operators twice her age. General Reed arrived on a helicopter 3 days before the program's 1-year anniversary. He found Langford in her quarters, a Spartan room containing only the essentials, a cot, a desk, and the M24 mounted on the wall in a place of honor. You've built something extraordinary, Reed said. Langford didn't turn from the window. The mountain view stretched endlessly, peaks and valleys that had watched over her transformation for the past year. I built what they needed, she said. The candidates did the rest. The after-action reports are remarkable. Engagements at ranges that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Operations that succeeded because operators trusted their training instead of their instruments. They learned what I learned. Langford finally turned to face him. That the math isn't everything. Sometimes you have to become the instrument. Reed reached into his pocket and extracted a small velvet box. I have something for you. Should have given it 6 years ago. Langford looked at the box. I don't want. It's not official. Reed opened the box, revealing a silver star, polished, gleaming, accompanied by a handwritten commendation. No record, no ceremony, just an acknowledgement from someone who was there. General, you saved my life at Kabul. Reed's voice carried emotion that generals rarely allowed themselves. 3 of my operators came home because of you. I spent 6 years wondering what happened to the shooter who made those kills. Whether she was alive, whether she was okay, whether she knew that what she did mattered. Langford looked at the medal. I'm not okay. I know. Reed closed the box and set it on her desk. But you're functioning. You're building something that will save lives for decades. You're passing on skills that no one else could teach. The guilt doesn't go away. It never does. Reed's voice softened, but it can become something else. Something that drives you forward instead of holding you down. Langford picked up the box. The silver star felt heavy in her hands, heavier than any metal should be. For deaths don't disappear, she said quietly. The math never balances. No. Reed moved to stand beside her at the window. But 24 operators are deployed right now because of what you built. More coming next year. And the year after that. Every life they save exists because you stopped hiding and started teaching. Langford looked at the medal for a long moment. Then she said beside the M24, not worn, not displayed, but present. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "What's that?" "The shot at Arizona, for 1,000 meters. It was the longest of my career." Langford's voice carried something new, not peace exactly, but something close to it. But the shot that mattered most was 2 feet. Reed frowned. "I don't understand." The step forward. Langford turned to face him fully. "When you asked if anyone could make that shot, and I stepped forward from the logistics tent, that was the hardest shot I've ever made. Everything after was just physics." 18 months after the program began, General Reed convened a classified briefing at the Pentagon. The audience included representatives from every major special operations command, JSOC, NSW, MARSOC, AFSOC, along with senior intelligence officials and the Secretary of Defense himself. "The GHOST program has exceeded every measurable objective," Reed announced. 24 graduates deployed, with an additional 32 currently in training. Operational success rate stands at 94%. 0 friendly casualties during GHOST-led operations. The numbers hung in the air. 0 casualties was nearly impossible in sustained combat operations. Yet the documentation confirmed it. 18 months of deployments without a single operator lost. "The key differentiator is not equipment or tactics," Reed continued. "It's training methodology. Captain Langford has developed an approach that integrates physical capability with psychological resilience in ways our conventional programs never achieved." "What's her secret?" the secretary asked. Reed paused. "Failure." Confused murmurs rippled through the room. Captain Langford lost 4 teammates in circumstances that should have claimed her entire team. She spent 6 years blaming herself for deaths that were not her fault. When she emerged from that darkness, she brought with her an understanding that most operators never acquire. "And what understanding is that, General?" "That perfection is impossible." Reed's voice carried conviction. "That failure is inevitable. That the only thing separating operators who survive from operators who don't is how they respond when the math stops working." The briefing continued for another hour. Slides showing engagement data, after-action reports, comparative analysis against conventional sniper programs. But the core message had been delivered. The GHOST program wasn't about making better shots. It was about making better human beings, operators who could carry the weight of impossible situations and still function when everything went wrong. Back at Phantom Site, Langford stood on the range with Elena Brennan. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Sparrow 7, Langford said, I have something for you." Elena turned. Langford held out a leather ballistics notebook, worn from 15 years of handling, filled with handwritten observations that spanned 3 continents and countless deployments. "This contains everything I know," Langford said. "Every wind pattern I've documented, every shot I've analyzed, every mistake I've made and learned from." Elena looked at the notebook. "Ma'am, I can't." "You can." Langford pressed the notebook into her hands. "The program doesn't need me forever. It needs to outlast me. And that means passing on not just techniques, but understanding." Elena's fingers traced the worn leather. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're ready." Langford's voice carried certainty. "To lead, to teach, to build the next generation of ghosts. But you?" "I'll still be here, but in a different capacity." Langford looked out at the mountain. "There's something I need to do, something I've been avoiding for 6 years." "What?" Langford reached into her pocket and extracted the photograph Reed had shown her in Arizona. The 5 operators posed in front of the Kandahar compound. Walsh, Kellerman, Bishop, Brennan, herself. "Their families," she said. "I never talked to them. After the memorial services, I disappeared, didn't return calls, didn't answer letters. I couldn't face them, couldn't look at the people who lost sons and brothers and husbands because I wasn't fast enough." Elena said nothing, but her eyes glistened in the fading light. "Your mother," Langford continued, "she wrote me 14 letters after Michael died. I never opened them. They're still in a box at Fort Benning, along with letters from 3 other families who deserved answers I couldn't give." "What changed?" Langford looked at the photograph for a long moment, for faces she'd carried for 6 years, for ghosts that would never truly leave. "You did," she said. "You showed me that honoring the dead isn't about punishing yourself. It's about continuing their work." making their sacrifice mean something. She tucked the photograph away. The ghost program is that continuation, but I owe their families more than silence. I owe them the truth, what happened, why it happened, and what their loved ones meant to me. Elena stepped forward and embraced her. The contact surprised Langford. She'd spent so long building walls that she'd forgotten what it felt like when someone broke through. Thank you, Elena whispered, for everything. Thank your brother. Langford's voice was rough with emotion. He's the one who wouldn't let me give up. Even from wherever he is now, he's still watching out for me. They stood together as the sun dipped below the mountains. The sky darkened. Stars began appearing. First one, then dozens, then thousands. Sparrow 6 to Sparrow 7. Langford said quietly, "Mission complete. You have the watch." Elena squared her shoulders. "Sparrow 7 copies. I have the watch." Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called out, a single cry echoing off the mountain walls before fading into silence. Langford picked up the M24 from its position beside the range. The rifle felt lighter than it had in years, no longer a weapon of penance, but a symbol of what she'd built, what she'd passed on, what would continue long after she was gone. The math still didn't balance, for deaths couldn't be erased by any number of lives saved. The guilt would never fully disappear. But now there were 24 operators who could make the shots she'd taught them, 32 more in training, hundreds more to come in the years ahead. For deaths don't disappear. The guilt doesn't vanish, but it can transform from weight that crushes to fuel that drives, from darkness that buries to fire that illuminates. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, a steel target still stands at 4,000 meters, struck dead center by a woman who stopped being invisible and started being extraordinary. The equation Sarah Langford carried for 6 years, 4 deaths, 12 kills, infinite guilt, would never truly balance. But it had finally begun to shift.